And when you ask the same question of those Cuban-Americans who were born in the United States, you have a fairly interesting mix here. All right? They are mainly Republicans, but this begins to look more like the rest of the United States, not like the rest of Latinos. All right? So one of the things that many of us have been saying is that Cuban-Americans will eventually look more like Latinos as they acculturate. Well, you know, maybe there's a couple of things. They're anti-systemic, right? The libertarian vote might even be seen as an anti-systemic vote. But this identity, you know, this I don't really care whether I'm Republican or Democrat is a fairly large answer there as well. So this is an interesting trend, and I guess we could ask our students here whether they're Republicans or Democrats and how strong their identification is with. So what does this tell us then now in terms of this vote and the results? When we asked the question, you know, for whom did you vote in the 2012 elections? This is the result that we got among Cuban Americans: 60% for Mitt Romney, 30.2% for Barack Obama. This is very much like the result that we got 2 weeks before the elections. And it is significantly different than the exit polls that we read days after the elections. So I would say there are three explanations. One, the exit polls were wrong. And what we find in Florida, if you go back to 2008, is that exit polls have been wrong in Florida, and they have been wrong pretty badly. Number one. Number two, as I said earlier, Cuban Americans changed their mind and are not reporting their real vote. But that's not really that large of a number of people. I mean, I think that for the most part, people do not lie to us in polls. Or do they, Mark? Right? People generally do not lie to us, right? But now, our data does favor older Cubans. You know, there are a number of issues that you know are very clear. Younger Cubans don't have landlines, and this is an issue for the kind of poll that we did. This is a robotic poll, all right? And before you start throwing out the whole study, what we'll find is that robotic polls have been fairly accurate and have been extraordinarily accurate, especially in 2012. And about 60% of the polling done in the United States today is robotic polling. All right, and we have weighted these results by age and time of arrival to approximate the population. So we, you know, I think that these results are fairly robust, and what you'll see now is again, women appear to be more Republican. Does age make a difference? And here's where we find an interesting shift, right? That those who say they voted for Obama are between 41 to 65 years old, right? And when you go to income as well, here you find that those with less income and those somewhere in middle income voted for Obama. And here's where you again find that Romney won overwhelmingly among earlier arrivals. That's consistent with much of what we have seen. And the shift begins for Obama around the 1980s, for the Democrats, of course. And then here is the result for the vote for President Obama among those who arrived after 2000. And among those who were born in the United States, Mitt Romney won pretty consistently. All right, so this is the study. What does this tell us? Well, again, to be redundant, exit polls have been wrong, and this poll suggests that they were not as accurate as we think they were. It is likely that some may have regretted their vote for Obama. Okay. Voter registration, as I said earlier, does not identify voters by national origin, so the only way to get to their to how they voted is through polling. All right. Now, these to me are the major findings, however, of this study. Cuban Americans are still different than the majority of Hispanics in the United States. Mark just pointed that out fairly clearly. And here's where I'm, you know, there is no Cuban American leader, regardless of his appeal among other Cubans or his broad appeal to conservative sectors, who's going to be able to attract other Hispanics to the Republican Party. The results of New Jersey kind of tell us something quite interesting, however, the results for the governor's vote, that you know, maybe this is where our senators, especially Senator Rubio, but also the Cuban-American senator from Texas, rather than shifting far to the right, may have to shift far to the middle if he wants to attract other Latino voters. And finally, I think to me it's clear that Republicans will have a grip on Cuban Americans for a long time to come. This is not the next election. This is not something that in the next election the Democrats are going to just simply take over the Republican vote. I think the trend that we see is that Republicans this is probably their only real safe area in the country in terms of Latino voters. And I think those who are predicting, you know, that there is going to be all of a sudden a Democratic takeover of Miami-Dade County, at least of Cuban-American Miami-Dade County, that is una muerte prematuramente anunciada. So, okay, so thank you.
Doing great in terms of time, and now we turn to Dr. Guillermo Grenier from the Department of Global and Social Cultural Studies at FIU.
Thank you. I feel so 20th century up here with 2 pieces of paper on my fingers. Yes, I'm going to, as soon as I can shut this page down and open mine up, be talking to you about this. Some evidence from the Cuba poll that we've conducted since 1991, and we were all young and had hair, and how these polls have shifted over time and the trends that they show within the Cuban-American population in Miami-Dade County. This is perhaps the most localized of all the discussions we've had so far. And most specifically, the Cuba polls deal generally about the attitudes of Cuban-Americans towards U.S. Cuba policy. So it's a narrower focus than we've been talking about, but one of the things that I think that you'll get in my presentation, hopefully, is that you'll decouple at some point this talk about party affiliation and ideological tendencies. At the end, I will talk a little bit about some of my ethnographic research during the discussion, during the Occupy movement here in Miami, and my interviews with Cuban Americans. But that will allow us to kind of decouple this identity and ideology, this party affiliation ideology conundrum a little bit. But let's look at this for a second. The trends. All right, so what I would do if this were a theoretical presentation is I would try to explain and kind of show evidence for the dimensions of social change in Miami that follow a pattern that are initiated by changing demographics of the community. That is, demographics are driving a lot of the attitudes that I am going to discuss as being trending over time in the Cuban-American community. Population, demographic changes culture, changes organizations, and groups become more or less relevant, and these groups end up changing institutions in Miami-Dade County. I'm talking specifically about our Cuban-American population in Miami-Dade County. Now, I'm not going to do that. That would be a way too long presentation. What I am going to do are these four things right here. I'm going to talk about the trends in Cuban migration and residency patterns in the last 10 years or so, then how these trends have shaped the Miami Latino demographics in our community, and how these trends have shaped the ideological content of political thought among the Cuban-American population in Miami-Dade County. Then there will be one final note on this idea of Cuban exceptionalism, that is how we are different than other Latinos, and I will talk about some dimensions to that we're finding from other research, political as opposed to civic ideology. And then finally, what you should walk away with in my next few minutes is that you should have a sense of the forces that are driving the changes in the Cuban attitudes and a sense of the content of those attitudes vis-a-vis U.S.-Cuban relations. Let's postpone this till, say, the year 2020. Maybe it'll shut the hell up. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is a graph that will show you how we are now in the midst of the most significant flow of Cubans from the island to the United States, 60 and 70% of these settling in the Miami area, in the last 50 years. Here what you have is a receiving permanent residency tally of Cubans by decade. Now you can break Cuban flows not necessarily by decades. Of course you have the Mariel boat lift, that was 1 year. You have the Puente Aéreo, which was the middle 60s to the early 70s. But if you break it down by decades, this last 10 years, however you cut it, we have more Cubans coming to the United States and receiving residency status than in any previous decade. And now we are, in the last 3 years, on track to break that record. 102,000 Cubans have received permanent residency status since 2010. All right, so we have this trend in increasing population, increasing. If you look at naturalization trends, that's also equally impressive. These are again by becoming citizens by year from the records of the Homeland Security handbook. So you can see that these numbers are pretty impressive. Now, if you look at the numbers comparatively to other Latino populations, then they lose somewhat some of the wow factor. Here you have the Dominicans, for example, are becoming citizens at a faster rate than Cubans. You have Venezuelans coming up. Cubans are still up there, but of course the kicker is that Dominicans don't all live in Miami and Cubans do. Right? So that's the significance of that's a comparative analysis. The kicker is that the Cuban presence in Miami dwarfs other Latino presence. And that's the example, those are the numbers from the 2010 census that should make you put all the previous slides in the context. That is, 35% of the population of Miami, 35% of the population of Miami is Cuban.
City of Miami?
No, Miami-Dade County, excuse me. No, city of Miami is way higher. Miami-Dade County. When I refer to Miami, I refer to Miami-Dade County. So 35%. Now only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other Latino groups, including Puerto Ricans, of course, who are citizens, push the bar up above 2%. So the Cuban presence, the naturalization, the migration patterns that I mentioned the last two, make a difference for us. And of course that's the kicker. At the national level, the Cuban vote is very much diluted. It doesn't much matter. But at the state and local level, it matters very much. So that's the pattern, and it's shaping Miami in a very specific way. It's shaping our political reality, our social reality, economic reality in a very specific way. Again, these are tickers that have frozen in time, but of course we're changing as we speak. In Miami's 2.5 million people, Miami-Dade County, 35% are Cuban origin. 31% are other Hispanics, but you can see how, in the previous slide, how the 35% of Cubans kind of trump any other national origins of the Hispanic group. But then down here you have the before 1994 and after 1994 arrivals. And this bunch, I mean, they might not all be dead, but they're certainly agotados in terms of, they don't make any more of those, agotados in every sense of the word. And this is the group that's growing, right, after 1994. And that is the group that is pushing ideological and demographic trends. And the parties might be the last things to change because they've become, in essence, to be a Republican, to be a Cuban, has become a